entrepreneurs and professionals of Tampa Bay. Welcome to your hour for getting the information, the tools, and the connections for elevating your business. Welcome to Getting the Edge with Kelly Wilson. And here's your host, Kelly Wilson.
Welcome to Getting the Edge. I'm your host, Kelly Wilson. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are happy to be here with you each and every week with the opportunity to highlight local business owners and community leaders. And we want to highlight them, but we really as well want to share their stories and talk about pieces of their life's puzzle, trials and tribulations, and everything that we can learn from them. I'm a true believer that we can learn a lot from each other's journey. So Getting the Edge is all about sharing. If you haven't already, please check us out at edgebusinessmagazine.com. We have a brand new magazine issue coming out very soon. We'll be launching the week of April 20th. A lot of great new content, articles on leadership and tech and growth and everything from a young entrepreneur just coming out of the university to high-level CEOs. So please check out edgebusinessmagazine.com for more information on that. But again, really excited to be here today. We are at Genghis Khan Restaurant in South Tampa filming. So if you're in the community, if you're looking for Mediterranean cuisine unlike any other, stop by Genghis Khan and tell him Edge sent you, and enjoy and say hello to Ergen while you're here. He's a great owner that's a great philanthropist in the community as well. So again, really excited to be here today. We've got a great show planned. We're going to talk a lot about leadership and life and the painting industry, and Kurt Schwahn, who is Vice President.
President.
Oh, President. I'm so sorry. I should have looked. President of Anvil Paints and Coating. Thank you so much for being here today.
Very welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so glad to have you. So Anvil Paints and Coating, now they are in the Clearwater St. Pete area.
In Largo.
In
actually.
Largo.
That's correct.
Okay.
Been there for over 50 years, actually, 52 years.
I was just going to say, with some of the research that I've done thus far, I've learned that they are they're quite old, that they've been around quite a few decades
Long
now.
time, that's
so tell
correct.
us a little bit about Anvil and your role
Sure.
there as president of
Sure.
Anvil. I'm so sorry.
At Anvil, we manufacture paints and coatings. We have most of our business, I'd say about 60% of our business is private label. We private label some of the biggest paint manufacturers in the world, in the country. We basically concentrate in 3 different areas, which are floor concrete, coatings, paints for your garages, for your walkways, things of that nature. Our second concentration is wall textures. So if you go into a hotel, feel a wall, bumpiness on the wall, that's a wall texture. And then our largest segment of our business is actually roof coating. So in the simplest way to explain that is when you're flying over a building, you see a white roof, that's usually some sort of membrane that's on the roof, or it's a coating, and we manufacture those coatings. So
you know, we were talking a little bit before the show started about humidity in Florida. How tough? I mean, that must just be really hard. And we don't talk about humidity and paint, and but I can only imagine talk about roof on top of a roof, like what that must include. And I know you have scientists in a whole different department to handle that.
Right,
but that
can make a big difference. You know, there's a different coating or painting application for every specific project and every specific substrate. But in more times than not, the atmosphere, the humidity, the temperature makes a big difference in the product that you choose.
Right, and I'm sure it can, depending on where you are in the world, right, it's kind of used and made differently. Okay,
Absolutely.
Anyway, well, like I said, we won't get into a science lesson with that today. But you mentioned private labeling. Let's talk a little bit about that and how that works with. So then you're then putting on private labels and letting them then, so it's actually Anvil paint. So you talk about that a little bit. How does that work?
So we have a variety of different private label customers, and they can be from the brands that your viewers have probably heard, Sherwin-Williams, PPG, et cetera, et cetera. But then we also have a unique segment of private label customers that are providing a solution to their customers. I'll give you just one example. We have a customer that actually coats with a special coating inside. They actually manufacture annual plants, and they needed a special coating inside of their tray to yield against mold, mildew, things of that nature.
Okay.
So they came to us. We collectively put together a formula, and now we basically create a product for them that they can then sell to their customers as well. So while we do have the large manufacturers and the ones that we've all heard of today, we also have a very unique segment in a variety of different markets, agriculture, the RV industry, actually the boating industry as well. And those are more of very exciting partnerships because we get a chance to meet with them. We identify a problem and or issue they have. We create a formula to meet those. And it's been a very successful partnership for us.
Well, obviously you're doing something right to be a part of a company that is 50 plus years in business. Looking back and now having spent, how many years now have you been with Anvil?
I've been in Anvil 4 years.
Okay, so having spent 4 years, and I do believe, so we're going to talk about changes in leadership, so we're going to talk to them about that, so you have gone through some changes. But what has been their secret sauce, in a sense? Like, what is their magic to last 50 years?
Well, we'll talk a little bit about some of the changes, but really at the end of the day, what has transcended from day one, from when the original founders, who I originally had worked for, through today, is really focusing on the customer and what the customer wants. And the private label piece is a pure example of that. Understanding that in every situation, every need is specific, and every customer is specific to what they are looking for. And that has truly been, it's transcended through all the years. Whether it's a consumer who's calling after they've ordered on Amazon.com saying, I have a problem, I have an issue, all the way up to we have a unique partnership where somebody calls and says, hey, I have a problem, can you help me solve it with a new formula? So at the end of the day, it's really focusing and putting the customer first. No matter who they are, small or large, is really what has bred success throughout the company for the last 50 years.
Well, congratulations on the success that the company's had, and then even that you've experienced with the company. I would think that there has to be a lot to do with the way that they're taking care of their team as well, and the culture and what that culture is like.
That's correct. That's correct. So when I started with the company about 4 years ago, one of the things that drew me to the company was the fact that they had some dedicated employees who had literally spent, a good portion of their working career, blood, sweat, and tears, helping build this company. The plant manager at the time had started with the company sweeping floors, and he worked himself all the way up to plant manager, which is the highest level in the manufacturing that we have. So that drew me to the company. And knowing that the average, out of all the employees we had there, the average employee was over 10 years had been with the company. So that in itself was very, absolutely, says a lot, says that they really took that customer, taking care of the customer to the next level, because they felt that, and their work ethic showed that they were not only, even though they weren't on the front lines, they were on the back line, making sure the product was made correctly, had the proper qualities that the customer was looking for, and then ultimately the customer received it. So that was very appealing to me when I first came onto the business, and something that we live through every single day, even through today.
Well, to go into a company where their average employee is 10 years, that definitely says something about the company and the way that they're taking care of them and making them feel as far as part of the family. Absolutely. Or like almost a part of the ownership, in a sense, that their input matters. You'd mentioned something about Amazon.
That's
and
correct.
Selling. So, I've talked with companies all the time and even help get started and do different consulting type opportunities. What, in your mind, with Amazon today, I mean, you can sell through your own website. How important is it to sell via Amazon and all these other different multiple platforms that are there?
Well, we've learned actually a lot in the last, when I first came on with the business, we weren't selling Amazon, and we started just as a test. And quite honestly, we had a lot of bumps in the road. Selling on Amazon is very different from selling on, obviously, Craigslist or eBay or anything of that nature. And we discovered that it's high maintenance, but the reward is very, very high. It is very important for, at the end of the day, Amazon, we have to remember, they're open 365 days a year, right? 24 hours a day. And the way that our culture is moving from, the non-traditional brick and mortar to the Amazon model or the .com model, as a manufacturer, we had to change with those times, because to be quite honest with you, when one of the sales guys came to me and said, hey, I want to sell, we should sell on Amazon, I said, you're crazy. Who in the world is going to buy paint or coating, especially for us, because we don't, we have more of a, we don't do traditional paints. We don't do, painting your houses or painting, your walls, interior, exterior. So, we gave it a whirl. I let them go for it, and quite honestly, it's been very, very successful successful for us. In fact, Amazon is our our fastest growing customer for the last 4 years, percentage-wise, since I've been with the company. So, and I anticipate this year will be another record-setting year for Amazon.
What percentages are you looking at?
So right now, actually, it's funny you asked, since we just finished the first quarter, we are up 68% over last year on our Amazon business alone.
68%?
68%. And again, we've had a lot of bumps in the road. Don't get me wrong. Right. We just didn't jump into
everything
it.
You're going to. With
and
everything.
it's been absolutely phenomenal. We've learned a lot. Our pages look completely different. Our customer interaction looks different. Our processing internally, our packaging, everything had to change from what we were normally doing, because at the end of the day, when somebody orders a product online, they want to see, they want to do everything they can do except for touch the product, right? So that's videos, it's pictures, it's full explanations, to the point when they order the product and then they want to know where it is. You have to update and make sure that process is going, all the way to the point where they're receiving it on their patio, because guess what? If they receive a gallon of paint or coatings on their patio and it's spilled all over, guess who looks bad? They're not looking at the carrier, and they're not looking at Amazon, they're looking at us. So we've had to change, our process dramatically, because, as I mentioned before, a lot of our business is private label, so we weren't really used to selling the consumer.
That's what I was just going to ask about.
We've had a big transition, and it's paying off very, very well. It's paying off we're very happy with our Amazon business.
Well, and just like with anything, you have to be ready to adapt to the change, and especially if you're implementing new strategies.
That's
and
correct.
new sales opportunities, which obviously this has shown that to explore the new trends.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the other questions I was going to ask too, because you are such a relationship-oriented company, and that's why you're 50 years and plus, and being private label. But you have to just transition.
Yeah, you have to engage that customer in any way you can. Especially on the Amazon, and I've taken it upon myself, because number one, I am an Amazon shopper, so I can appreciate when I ask a question, if I can get a quick response, or if there's a problem, if I can have a quick resolution. So I take it upon myself to answer every question I can that comes through Amazon, and I've found that has helped our business dramatically, because people see, again, transcend back to that culture that we had talked about with my employees being there for so long. That transcends into what the consumer is, that we care about our customer and we care about our employees, and it all works together nicely.
That's great. Well, I want to talk a little bit about, I think you might have answered that already, about some of the problems that you'd faced with Amazon, and then how you were able to remedy those.
Right.
And then obviously, again, congratulations on that. And seeing those opportunities, and being a president of a company that goes with it and supports, who are telling you that you should do this. So anyway, I'll take a quick break. We'll be right back more with Kurt Schwahn. See you soon.
This is the Cannabis Podcast, powered by TrueLeaf on Radio Influence. It's an inside look and the scientific facts in and around the world of medical cannabis. Now, here is your host, Ian Beckles.
He's a successful entrepreneur, published author, top listing agent, a real estate and finance expert that goes to bat for you every day as a consumer advocate. Your host and the consumer quarterback, Brandon Rhymes.
back to Getting the Edge. I'm your host, Kelly Wilson. Thank you so much for being with us today. Great show. If you've missed any, please go back and make sure you rewind and watch the beginning part of the show. Really excited to have Kurt Schwahn, president of Anvil Paints and Coating, here with us today from the Largo community. Anvil Paints, an over 50-year-old company. So yeah, really excited to be here and kind of pick your brain with all the information that you're willing to share with us today.
Sure.
So thank you for being here. Right before we took a break, we're talking about kind of adapting to change, leadership through change, but we talked about being able to identify new opportunities to sell your product, and we mentioned Amazon briefly. Congratulations again on your success. I think we talked right before the break about 68% growth as far as in your company with that, so that's amazing. We mentioned that you have to be able to adapt to change.
Absolutely.
Identify where the problems are and how you fix them. I think a lot of times where I've talked to different companies where they just see something not working and they just stop. Well, that didn't work.
No.
Well, you really have to identify what's not working.
Right.
And what can we make work, right?
Absolutely.
And so what were some of, and again, Amazon, I get asked about Amazon a lot. What are some of the biggest problems, or not, well, maybe problems or issues, or just
Sure.
where you felt you needed to address where there might need, change needed was, you know what I mean?
Sure. Well, quite honestly, I mean, it's things that are very obvious after the fact. Again, as most of us are consumers today, most of us who shop on Amazon, you can really, if you think about it, foresee what the problems are. But as you go through a business, again, you kind of saw them after the fact. For us, you know,
That's interesting that you say that. A lot of it is.
It is. I mean, exactly, because we all
Right.
it's all after
You're
the
like,
fact.
I should have known that.
Exactly right. Right. As a consumer, but at the end of the day, what we do and what I try to do with my staff is whenever we do identify a challenge specifically within Amazon, we step back and say, okay, as a consumer, what would I have wanted, right?
Okay.
And so some of the challenges that we came with, a couple things, which is packaging, right? Because at the end of the day, a gallon of paint or a 5-gallon of paint or multiple gallons of paint has to get from our warehouse to your doorstep without it breaking, without it spilling, without it having any problems with it. And that in itself was a big issue because, you know, historically, our products were sold mainly to distribution or private label type customers, and so we would send it on a pallet, right? So my my warehouse manager, who's been now 13, 14 plus years with the company, spent most of his career just filling pallets of product, and now all of a sudden we told him he had to put things in a 1-gallon box, and which in theory sounds good, but when you get it, goes through multiple hands, through distribution centers, through the carrier, so on and so forth, by the time it gets to the end user product, it's either damaged, dented, which people don't, when they pay high dollar for a product, they want it to look good when they get it, or even worse is if there's spilling or leaking or anything of that nature. Nobody wants to have, a nice package that they just spent sitting on their porch, painted all over. I mean, that's not, I'm sure that wasn't the intention of the coating. So, that was our biggest challenge at the very beginning, is understanding how to get it from the order to the consumer in making sure that it left the same way, or they received it the same way as it left. So that was a big challenge for us. But through packaging engineer, I have a fantastic, operations manager who has a great engineering mind, and I have, a dedicated warehouse manager. We were able to figure out a great solution, and now, and also working with Amazon as well, because, we had people come in and identify what the packaging should be, and, we had to go through certain testing and all things of that nature. But we actually in fact, I had this meeting last night. We are very happy to say that this year, our packaging claims have gone down 98% versus where we were last year. So,
interesting.
And I think that's attributed to a couple different things, but I think primarily it's attributed to better packaging. So
it's interesting. And again, just taking the time to work with your team to identify these problems has now increased your revenue.
Absolutely.
So I think that can be a lesson to all of us.
For sure.
But it's funny, you mentioned, we talk about the paint can and how that looks. I attended, and I'm so bad with names, I attended recently USF, Muma College of Business. Edge Business Magazine is very excited to be a partner of Muma College of Business. They had the co-founder of Netflix. Mark Randolph, I believe, maybe is his name. Interesting, great speaking. Great to hear the story about Netflix. Well, in his presentation, because he talks about how everything has changed in time and how nothing's really the way it was in the 80s. Everything's evolved except for the paint can. you know, he brings that up in his presentation, and he, you know, on the screen he's got this large can of paint. You know, I still use a screwdriver to pop it open. I still hammer it to shut it.
Right.
Okay, you know, I'm just out of some trivia.
Right.
Why hasn't it changed along with other things?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, for all your entrepreneurs out there, maybe that's the next best thing. I'm always up for opening opportunities for a better way to package our product. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, you got to remember that, you know, making paint is no different from making a cake, really, at the end of the day. It's just a bunch of ingredients, you stir it up, you get an end result, and paint's no different. Now, the paint can tends to be probably a little, elementary because there's chemicals.
And it's nothing on you, obviously,
no,
personally.
absolutely. I purchase a lot of paint cans a year, right? Yeah.
And I have through my life, and it is funny that a paint can has not changed. He was like, you know, he even made the comment, you think they'd pour. Because you have to get a spill, the drape that you have to put, you know, you have to do the tape around. It was an interesting kind of fun fact. I'm sure there were probably a few hundred people at this speaking series we were at. I'm sure he kind of, many left after that and are trying to brainstorm about how to create a oh, that's just funny. But it's an interesting fact.
It is. I mean, you know what? That just goes to show you just...
it works, I guess.
It does work, but at the end of the day, I think as, you know, as being an entrepreneur, you know, an entrepreneurial mind, I think at the end of the day, it's important for us to always look at the norm, but not be satisfied with the norm, right? There's always a better way to do things. And we talked about Amazon and packaging. You wouldn't think a box design or a process of how we're implementing, you know, going from the pour to the box makes a difference, but at the end of the day, it does. Even though it worked before, it wasn't getting the result we needed at the end of the day.
Right. So. Yeah. Well, something to think about
as we absolutely
as our entrepreneurial minded selves. Question: you'd mentioned paint being splattered all over patios or something. How do you determine, as a president of a company, and even now with Amazon, how do you determine return policies?
You know, it's a very tough question, right? Because, you know, at the end of the day, as a consumer, we want an easy return, right? No matter what we're buying, right? And I will say one of the benefits of Amazon is they do a very nice job at managing the expectations both on the consumer side as well as the seller or manufacturer side. Now, however, there is always going to be the chance where consumers, try to do what they can. I mean, I'll be honest with you, we've had products sent back that are half empty or half full, depends on how you want to look at it.
And that is kind of my point leading to that. You have to be careful because that could eat and take away from ultimately your bottom line.
It does.
So
it does. You know, I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing that we do is set our own expectations because there's only so many barriers that we can create. It's like driving down a road. You know, if there's cones down the road, you want people to stay in the cones, but at some time it's going to go. You're going to have people go outside those cones. So we bake that into our analysis of how we do this. We know that there's going to be some unauthorized returns, if you will. But at the end of the day, we feel like if we have the structure set up that we have partnered with Amazon, understanding what the return policy is, keeping in constant communication with the customer, that's the biggest challenge too, is that when a customer sends a complaint in or has an issue, you know, what we discovered when we first started, in the last segment we talked about the challenges we had, what we discovered is that when we weren't communicating, the problems escalated very, very quickly. However, if you communicate quickly, they're resolved much more quickly and much quicker as well.
Imagine.
So, you know, that is, you know, number one, we set our own expectations and realistic that there are going to be some folks that fall out that do get returns and things that are maybe be unauthorized. We understand that. We don't like it, we don't approve it, but it's just kind of the cost of doing business. But at the end of the day, the second thing that we do is that we communicate. And once we communicate, identify what the problem is, show that there's a simple, resolution to it, our consumers and customers, the process goes much quicker. And sometimes it's a return, sometimes it's a warranty claim if there's an issue, and then sometimes it's just an education, and the consumer will understand that what the problem is, and we'll rectify it the best way we can.
Was it important to set up a different policy for an Amazon or other type than you might currently carry within the company itself?
Yeah, it is. I mean, ultimately we have the same return policy which falls in our warranties, but relative to Amazon, we also do business Home Depot, Lowe's, and things of that nature. And with those guys, they charge. It's a little bit different because Home Depot and Lowe's you can go and just return it to the store and they're going to take it. So from that perspective, we have to set up different parameters with the seller versus than we do with the consumer. And it's a bit more challenging, to be quite honest with you. But I would say that, there's a reason why Amazon's the largest retailer in the world, right? They've figured it out. They figured out how to work on both ends of that consumer and the manufacturer. Nothing against Home Depot or Lowe's. They're doing a great job. But it is another challenge. It is an absolute challenge. And for us, we have to take that into consideration as we focus where our business is going to go, number one. Number two, we have to focus on, hey, where our investment is going to go. Because, at the end of the day, you mentioned earlier, it's the bottom line. And if we get more returns than we are selling, that's not a good thing.
Well, and I purchased a product the other day, and as I'm online, and it's leading me down this process, and then something pops up, lifetime guarantee, and money back, and I'm thinking, how can a company afford to do this, especially a lifetime? And I'm not saying Ant Paint does. Obviously, you could use all the, but what? Obviously, and I've asked quite a few people about this just to get their take on it recently, because obviously the returns are not that significant that it is affecting their bottom line. But you people out there are you're going to get some back. Yeah. But obviously they're not significant. But
yeah, you have to take that into consideration when you're building your model, right? It can't be, number one, you can't assume that you're not going to get any return. You're not going to get, no returns are going to come back, right? And on the flip side, you can't assume that everybody's going to return, right? So you have to find that fine line, and it is challenging, but it does, to your point earlier, it does make a difference on where you're going to market, right? So our return policy is different on private label versus going to the contractor or the commercial end user versus the the online. Not to say that the underlying policy is not the same, which is we always stand behind our product, but really, how are we going to make sure we satisfy the customer no matter who they are?
Yeah, I guess that goes back into and leads into policies and procedures, and exactly, because when you have private label and all these different types of methods of the sale, then you have different methods and policies for all of them. We talked a little bit, you'd mentioned like Sherwin-Williams, and it's just amazing, again, another way things have changed so much, and the way we sell. There used to be Sherwin-Williams all over the place, and they're not really anymore. And I don't know, I wouldn't think that people are going to go run online to buy paint, because again, it is see and feel and touch, and they want to see it. So I want to talk a little bit about how that's changed and how it's affected the painting industry. So don't go away. We'll be right back. More with Kurt Schwahn.
This is the Cannabis Podcast, powered by TrueLeaf on Radio Influence. It's an inside look and the scientific facts in and around the world of medical cannabis. Now, here is your host, Ian Beckles.
He's a successful entrepreneur, published author, top listing agent, a real estate and finance expert that goes to bat for you every day as a consumer advocate. Your host and the consumer quarterback, Brandon Rhymes.
Welcome back to Getting the Edge. I'm your host, Kelly Wilson. Thank you for being with us today. If you have not already, make sure you check out edgebusinessmagazine.com. Check out our previous issues of Edge. We'll be celebrating our 6th year in September, so really excited about that. We have been a driving force, a large very much an advocate for entrepreneurs in the community, so really excited to be here. Again, new issue coming soon. Will be out later in April, so make sure you stay tuned on that. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or any additional questions, reach out to us at info@edgebusinessmagazine.com. So here today with Kurt Schwahn. He's president of Anvil Paint and Coating. Great conversation so far, and I always joke, hit rewind and go back if you've missed any of it. Really, so we talk, wow, so industry, the way we sell, everything has changed so much over the years.
Absolutely.
And with e-commerce and then now Amazon, just all of it. We kind of joked that there used to be a Sherwin-Williams at every corner almost, and you really don't see them anymore. I've seen a few still, and I'm sure there's even other paint companies. I just can't think of them offhand. Obviously, you don't need to. That retail aspect of paint isn't, and I'm going to throw a few points at you. And that goes back to, because one of the questions I'm going to ask is, businesses are very relationship oriented, and being in business 50 years, it's not just about selling paint. It's about the relationships that you have within your culture of the company, but also with your with the people that are buying your product. As you get so big and as you distant from not having retail spots, and how do you retain that relationship, and how do you
it's a great question. I would say that, the market, especially in our business, the coatings market has changed, right? And I think I think that, multiple industries could say that, going from your traditional brick and mortar to your .com platform. For us, we're very fortunate. We're partnering with a great PR firm, as you know, Double Take. They do a great job for us.
Yes, they're great.
They make sure that we're social media. They make sure that we're involved in the community aspects. We're doing partnerships with our local city municipalities. That in itself is because folks are they're moving to those type of venues to get information and develop that relationship. So that's kind of at the top level, but I always say, regardless of where you are in social media, regardless of how many articles you present, at the end of the day, it really matters is when they do call or when they do email or they do post, is that we have that continuous communication with them. So as I said in the earlier segment, is that I take it upon myself to take pride in the fact that I interact with my Amazon customers as much as I can. Sometimes I'll have technical difficulties. I'll have to go to my chemist or things of that nature. But the reality is that I like to have that communication with them because, and it's funny, some folks will be like, wow, I didn't know that the president was going to email me back. Well, that doesn't really make a difference. I'm a consumer trying to help another consumer at the end of the day. So to answer your question is that, regardless of of how we're getting to the market, we still have to have that one-on-one interaction, regardless of whether it's email or they pick up the phone and have a question. We can't just ignore those things.
That's a great answer. And that does, I think it's great too that you see the importance of the marketing perspective and continuing to be relevant in the community and genuinely and really caring and engaging. So I think Anvil is very lucky to have you representing the company.
Thank you.
Now you've gone through some changes. Let's talk a little bit about leading through change and what it's like when you do kind of take over a role in a company that you are going to be now leading through change. How do you maneuver? How do you keep the culture?
That's a great question. It's difficult, and sometimes when I took on the role, the original shareholders, the whole role was for us to sell the business, right? They did not have a succession plan. They didn't have children that wanted to take over the business. So the whole goal was to get the business ready, find a suitable new buyer. But at the end of the day, the original shareholders had a passion for those longtime employees that we had talked about. So my job was to, it was originally originally to corral those employees, bring them in, show them that I cared about them as much as the original shareholders did, and that I was going to bring them to the next level, the next phase of this business, which was going to bring them into a buyer who felt the same way we did. So managing through those changes was very difficult. They saw a new guy coming in. They saw a younger guy coming in some cases, and they were very nervous, right? Very nervous. But at the end of the day, my philosophy as a leader, manager throughout my entire career has been, you have to take care of your people and they'll take care of you. It's an old cliche, but it's 100% true. I make sure every single day I walk through the plant, I talk to every single employee. I don't care if they're a temp all the way up through my chemist. I will talk to them, ask them how they're doing. Our philosophy in our business is that we have an Anvil family, right? So we make sure we're engaging our employees through one-on-one conversations, through events, through employee appreciation. And so once I established that, getting through the sale was pretty easy because they all believed in not only the company, but now they believed in what I was doing for them. And as we went through that change, it was difficult. I mean, just like any of your viewers have been through change and through acquisitions, it's very difficult. People get very nervous. They're putting food on their table, right?
They're going to keep their job, especially after they've dedicated so much of their life.
Absolutely correct. So, but the key is that once I showed that I had the same compassion for them as the original shareholders did, then life became much easier, right? It was 6 months to a year of me dedicating myself to, obviously doing the business things, working the P&L, all those other things, but it was, spending multiple hours with each employee, understanding, how many kids do you have? Where do they go to school? What are your long-term goals? What are your plans? And once I was able to show that I had a true compassion for them, and oh, by the way, I opened up to them as well. They knew my wife, my kids, my family, where I lived.
It's like undercover boss,
it was,
without being undercover.
Right. Yeah, absolutely right. And, that is truly the key. And to be quite honest with you, that, in my opinion, from day one until today, has led why we have had minimal turnover after the acquisition. In fact, after the acquisition, we had 3 employees leave that were family members of the original shareholders. Everybody else stayed. And so that in itself was I hate to pat myself on the back, but I was very proud of that. I was very proud of that.
And really after talking to you and after interviewing so many great, amazing individuals and leaders, when I ask the question often, how do you keep a great culture? But I don't know that you can just create great culture. I think it's really dependent on the people.
It is.
And making sure that the right people that are genuinely passionate and they genuinely care. And I think that's one of the great things in our time today that we've evolved into as leaders, showing vulnerability and compassion. I always ask, what is one leadership trait or quality that you think every leader should possess? And even 95% of the time it's empathy or vulnerability or compassion, because it's okay now like when I was growing up, when we were growing up, you really weren't supposed, you were tough, you weren't supposed to act as if you cared.
That's right.
And now I think in our culture and in society today, people want to know that you care about them.
That's correct.
And so I don't know that you can just create that. It's dependent on the person. That's what creates a great culture. And that's obviously, you're one of those great people that can make people feel comfortable, and I think you genuinely care, and I mean that vibe comes off even just talking with you. So well, let's talk a little bit about how you got started. And so where are you from originally?
So originally I was born in Chicago, Illinois.
Fellow Midwesterner.
Fellow Midwesterner. Then my mom and I, my single mom, moved down to Texas. We lived there for about 11 years. My mom got remarried there, and then my junior year in high school, moved to the beautiful city of Clearwater, Florida. Graduated at Clearwater High, go Tornadoes. And so I am a local, but been here, so was there, and then I was actually, after high school, went off, joined the military. I was in the Navy, attached to the Marine Corps for about 8 years. I did some active and some reserve time while I went to college, Florida State.
Go Florida State.
Go Florida State, go Seminoles. So I graduated there in '95. I then started with Black & Decker at the time, which had a phenomenal program program for young, hardworking entrepreneurs because, it was a sales role, but at the end of the day, they gave you kind of the parameters, which were just go out and grow the business, go build relationships, grow the business. So I cut my teeth not only in the consumer products industry, but I cut my teeth on sales, relationship building, and it really helped me build that foundation. And they were a great, I had some great mentors, great leaders, great managers that helped me build my career. And I spent half a dozen years there, then went on to Newell Rubbermaid.
Let's go back to Black & Decker a little bit. So, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial-minded people, kind of start in a sales world because it allows them to kind of take control of what they want to accomplish. Let's talk about your role there. So, how many years ago was this?
Well, let's see. I graduated in December of '95, so I started in January '96, and I worked there through '96 through 2002, I'd say. Yeah,
okay,
a while
15
ago.
years plus. Okay.
Dating myself here.
Well, that's okay. When you look back on those times and you say like a sales, like what was that process like? Or when they said go out and sell, what was your philosophy then? Like, how'd you make it?
Well, it's funny. So, they put you through, you go through the boot camp with all the other, young, passionate, excited people, go into there at the time, the headquarters were in Towson, Maryland. And, you went up and you just got, really just how to bleed, Black & Decker. And so you come out real excited, but ultimately at the end of the day, obviously, that there's drive and passion, which I think everybody in the room had, right? That's why they hired us. There was product education and product knowledge, which they gave us. But, I always go back to, one of the greatest things one of my first managers ever told me, he said, if you can be a chameleon, you can sell anything you want. And you can be the best leader there is. And I didn't quite get it. And as I grew a little bit and got to know him a little bit better, he explained to me that, when you're selling or when you're in front of a customer, no matter if it's a CEO or whether it's a department head manager at a store, you need to understand, you need to become that person and turn the same color as that person, because that is going to help them relate to you, and ultimately it's going to help the success of both of you.
That's great advice, actually. And that's one of the reasons I ask. It's interesting, and I think even before the show started, I talk about our lives as pieces of a puzzle. And I have a 19-year-old that, and I get it. Who knows what they want to do at that age? But if you take a step, you take steps. Those steps lead to other things. And those are the pieces of the puzzle that ultimately all come together. So it's interesting. That's kind of why I wanted to stop you for a minute and talk a little bit about that. So I want to talk a little bit more about that piece of the puzzle. Don't go away. We'll be right back more with Getting the Edge.
This is the Cannabis Podcast, powered by TrueLeaf on Radio Influence. It's an inside look and the scientific facts in and around the world of medical cannabis. Now, here is your host, Ian Beckles.
He's a successful entrepreneur, published author, top listing agent, a real estate and finance expert that goes to bat for you every day as a consumer advocate. Your host and the consumer quarterback, Brandon Rhymes.
Welcome back to Getting the Edge. I'm your host, Kelly Wilson. Really excited to be with you today and talking with the great Kurt Anvil, or Kurt Schwahn, president of Anvil. I tell you, it's the names. It's kind of funny. It's one of the features. I used to call them issues, now they're features. Anyway, great story, and I appreciate you sharing all the information with us. So we're talking again about, right before the break, about pieces of the puzzle and just how our lives kind of fall into place, and it's really about taking a step, and these steps kind of forming, again, this puzzle. So we talked about Rubbermaid, Black and Decker
was first.
So great sales, great advice too, and thank you for sharing. Again, if you've missed any of it, make sure you go back and check out any part of the show that you've missed. Okay, so let's then talk about then your next venture, which was then with Rubbermaid.
Newell Rubbermaid, that's correct. So obviously that business has changed since I've been there, but at the time it was Newell Rubbermaid. And so I escalated to there. I was doing a variety of different sales and marketing roles. My last job was probably my biggest challenge when I left, and my biggest challenge of managing a large group of people, very diverse group of people from college to retirement. I often tease and say, I was doing training sessions on product knowledge all the way to giving retirement parties on side. So it was a great challenge for me because it's something I felt a passion about, was being a good leader, mentor, and basically a growth coordinator for individuals, regardless of where they're in their career. So it was very, very rewarding. I had, roughly 100, at any given time, be 100 to 150 people underneath my wing. And I learned a lot about the process. I got to manage a variety of different customers, everything from distribution all the way to the Home Depot and Lowe's out in the field. And it was a very, very rewarding career with them. I really, really enjoyed my time with them, for sure.
And so through the years, you've owned your own businesses and different franchises as well.
Correct.
Let's talk a little bit about that. What were some that you've been a part of?
So when we lived in North Carolina when I was working for Newell Rubbermaid, and we decided to take a step back for a little bit personal reason. Wanted to come back here, so I started working for a small consulting firm, working with other small companies, helping them grow their businesses, helping them drive bottom line. Very rewarding. I wanted to put myself into a scenario and talk about building blocks, which it's been a true blessing. Is I wanted to put myself in a scenario I had the large Fortune 100 company, but wanted to see what it was like in a small, see what the difference was.
Well, I think makes you the great leader that you are, because you've had these different experiences. You can relate to people on all sides.
100% agree. And so that was another one of those building blocks. So we decided to take that role, move back here as a family, and it's that in itself was it was a big step for us, right?
I can imagine.
At the end of the day, but ultimately, like I said, to your point, it was that building step that helped us get to where we wanted to be. So now.
Well, and I think sometimes especially when we are innovative and entrepreneurial-minded people, that you always kind of have these ideas and want to do more. You want to innovate and be a part of a lot of things. And I think a lot of us too, we don't want any regrets in anything. We want to know that we've kind of done everything.
Done it all,
Right, and then where are we? Sure. Where do we thrive the best?
Exactly.
Or where ultimately you can be a part of a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
But so again, difference in experience between kind of more from a solo perspective to large.
That's correct. Yeah. So when I came back to the consulting business, it enabled me to kind of open my entrepreneurial mind a little bit. From a timing perspective, from a focus perspective. I've got great support from my wife and family, which have always.
That's great.
They've always listened to. I've had a lot of crazy ideas, and even my PR marketing, I've thrown her a lot of crazy ideas at times too. But so we've
it's great to have the sounding board, right?
It does. Some are good.
Need that,
right. And just like any good entrepreneur will tell you, some are fantastic and some fail. I mean, you have to be ready to fail. Right. And so, for us, we've invested. We've done the franchise. We've bought and sold some of those. We've invested in other small little businesses. And for us, it's been very, very rewarding because, to your point earlier, building those blocks, right? But at the same time, driving the same passion. So utilizing my experiences, my passions, what I feel like my God-given talents are, put all those into one, and then with the support of the family, it's been a very good run for us in our business, for sure.
Congratulations again, just on all the, on all of your experiences and successes. What is, if you could go back 15, 20 years, kind of at your Rubbermaid, Black and Decker, maybe, what advice would you give that younger Kurt?
Sure. That's a good question, actually. And I would say there would be two things. I would say, number one, always keep an open mind, right? Always keep an open mind. Don't close the door to anything that comes your way relative to just processing and thinking about it.
Right.
And then one thing I always tell all my employees, don't let finances make your decisions, okay? And that can be both ways, right? It can be, don't always jump if somebody comes and offers you a couple more dollars, and vice versa. Don't let your goals of, maybe discovering that new paint can, right?
Right.
To don't let the finances, because if you have a passion for something, you can't let the money or the finances hold you back, and vice versa. If you make a decision, if you just jump to another company just for dollars and cents, it's short term. You got to think about, you got to play the long-term game.
Right. If you, or one of the questions, you gave us great advice and a great tip somebody had given you, advice that somebody had given you earlier on. And one of the questions I would like to ask are, best advice you've ever been given. Does that kind of stand out?
It does.
Or tell it then. What best advice you've ever been given?
Yeah, so I'll go back to what I said from one of my previous managers, that be a chameleon, because at the time I just attributed that walking into that decision maker, right? And whether it was that person liked to fish, or that person was a family guy, or that person was whatever their objective was, that was going to be mine as well. But really, at the end of the day, it's transcended over to me managing my employees now, because now I need to be a chameleon with my warehouse manager, to my secretary, to my operations manager, because I need to know what drives them. I need to know what makes, it's going to make them happy at the end of the day. And if I can do that with them, and I do it with my customers, then ultimately there's success.
And that's really identifying with everyone. As you have conversations, I think in our personal relationships and our business relationships, a lot of times we can talk, but people don't really talk and have conversations to hear one another. They talk just to say what they have to say, but it's really truly listening and identifying with the needs and, I guess, point of view of the other person, and trying to kind of really relate. So,
absolutely,
man, I think that I'll use that one. I think that it's a great way to look at it, because it is really about diving into and I wish the world today would do that.
Yeah, right.
If we all would just do that.
Understand, right? Yeah, because at the end of the day, my objectives are different from, my personal objectives are different from my warehouse manager.
Right,
he's got different families, he's got different circumstances, and at the end of the day, we all enjoy work. We all enjoy what we do, hopefully anyway. But at the end of the day, we're all just trying to make better lives for us.
And if we don't all enjoy what we do, we need to really think about it. And it kind of goes back to some of the driving points of the advice you'd give your younger self.
Right.
Really, it's not about the money always.
Right.
It's really, because otherwise you're going to have this pit in your stomach, I think, ongoing, that eats at you until you really start kind of going and towards. I was watching something the other day, and it was talking about, and I agree, just kind of not I was going to say voices in our heads. I don't want to sound like crazy people, but I mean just those, I think it's the universe really talking and pulling you, and it's where the dreams come from.
Right.
It's where all that comes from, and they're there for a reason. It's something I was watching. She said the voices have kind of stopped, and they joke because I'm more on the path of where I'm supposed to be, because it's pushed me that way.
That's
so
good. That's
it kind of goes back to that. What is your definition of success today?
That's a good. I think there's lots of definitions for success.
That's why I said today.
Yeah, today.
Too.
For me, actually, ultimately, I think my definition of success is obviously changed a little bit more as I've gotten older, building my career. But really, at the end of the day, my definition of success is when I can look around me and the folks around me are successful in their own mind as well, right? So whether that's my employers, I have 3 teenage boys, and I want them to meet their objectives, and my wife and meet her objectives, and my customers and me in there. So if I can sit back and I can see the success in their eyes, that's a definition of success for me.
That's a good answer. What might people be surprised to know about Kurt Schwahn?
What's know about me? Well, you may not look it, but I have been I am an Ironman athlete, so I tribute to all my Ironman fellow athletes out there.
So that's like a triathlete.
Triathlon, yes, triathlon. So Ironman, who's I believe still here locally, but they great company, great event. It's 2-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a marathon behind it. So,
oh my goodness!
So fortunately, I've done 2 of those, and again, I will 100% contribute or give kudos, and I've mentioned a few times, but to the family, because That's a lot of training, and they don't see you a lot for a year because you're training 5-6 hours a day.
Is that really what it takes? Is it a year to train or before?
For this guy, it did, right? Some it may take a little less. For this guy, it did. Yeah, it took about a year.
We talked a lot about advice on building a staff, and you didn't really give advice, but we talked about the culture, and I think you've provided a lot of information there. What advice or tips would you provide, could you give or offer to someone that was just starting out today, whether in a leading position or starting their own company?
Sure.
Any general overall advice to?
You'll hear this a lot, but you really have to surround yourself with smart people. And quite honestly, you need to find out what you're not good at. And I'll give you a prime example. A partner of mine in a venture that we have, he is extremely smart, extremely well off. He's done very, very well in his career, retired early in his career. And the one thing that he said to me is when I asked him, I said, "Why are you asking me to be involved in your business?" And he said, "Because you're good at the things I'm not." And that's exactly what, and again, you hear, hire people smarter than you, but at the end of the day, that hit home for me, because as smart and as brilliant as I think he is, he identified the things he's not good at, and he involved me.
That's great. I ask a lot of times, should you focus on further developing your weaknesses or fine-tuning your strengths?
Right.
And I think you answered that perfectly. And I think that is, none of us can know everything.
Right.
And I think, but you can almost make magic when you really kind of complement the different people into a project that can utilize their strength. So,
That's right.
wow, I appreciate you talking with us today. Now, what is your goal? Like, will you stay with Anvil? Do you have a exit strategy, or what are your plans?
I enjoy, our company treats us very well. So as you mentioned, we had a purchase, and the purchasing company has been fantastic. They treat me well. They treat my employees well. I live in paradise, as you know.
Absolutely, right.
So no, I'm very, very happy where I am. It's been a great run. I have no reason or I like to continue outside things just as my entrepreneurial spirit comes about. But at the end of the day, I really enjoy, my passion is for my people and my customers, and there's really no better place to be.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story with us today, Kurt. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for watching Getting the Edge. We'll be back with you next week for another story. In the meantime, visit our website, edgebusinessmagazine.com. See you soon.